Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the 2020 Virtual Conference on Metastatic Breast Cancer. I'm really pleased to welcome you back for our afternoon keynote session, Shared Voices Learning from Each Other. My name is Janine Guglielmino, and I am the Vice President of Mission Delivery at Living Beyond Breast Cancer. So it's a very different year, and we're meeting in a different way. But one of my favorite parts of this conference is the Learning from Each Other panel, because it's an opportunity for us to talk with a few members of our community about the good days, the hard days, and all of the days that come in between. So today we're going to be talking about how to manage a recent diagnosis, how to cope with ongoing uncertainty, making treatment decisions, having difficult conversations, getting support, and everything else. So we are going to take your questions throughout to the best of our ability, and you can submit your questions by using the question and answer function that you see on your screen. Before we jump in, I did want to again acknowledge our funders. We are so grateful to them for their flexibility this year and for working with us. So I'd like to again thank our lead sponsor, Forward for Toby, and our title sponsors, Athenex Oncology, Novartis, and Pfizer Oncology. And to see all of our sponsors, please visit the conference website. And I hope that you'll drop by for those who are exhibitors and say hi to them, and also just spend some time with our exhibitors tomorrow when we're back. So we're very grateful to be able to provide what I know is going to be a really informative session for you. And so just a couple of housekeeping items. As Jean mentioned in the opening plenary, if you're able to do so, we deeply appreciate any donations that you can give to lbbc.org to help us continue to provide the education that we are throughout this crisis. And also for those of you who are on Instagram and who understand how to use it, unlike me, please go on there and follow our page and tell all your friends so that we can get to our 10,000 milestone. So now I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. And I want to begin by introducing Jennifer Bires, who is a licensed clinical social worker and the executive director of Life with Cancer in Northern Virginia. Thanks for being with us, Jennifer. And also joining us today are 4 superstar women. These women were on the advisory committee to develop the content for this conference. So they are responsible for all of this amazing content that you are getting this weekend. They were with us all along for months and months during the planning. And when we had to pivot everything to a virtual conference, they came along with us. And I am so grateful that they are here to share their experiences with metastatic breast cancer with us today. So with that, I would like to welcome them. So please join me in welcoming Abigail Johnston, Sheila McGlown, Ruth Pepper, and Shawn Tei Randall. Thank you, ladies, for being with us. So just to get us started, I wanted to briefly go to each of you and have you share where you're joining us from, the year you were diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, the type of metastatic breast cancer, and one reason why you feel it's important to share your story. So let's start with Abigail.
Thank you, Janine. And I do want to say we have provided advice, but all of the heavy lifting has been done by the staff at LBBC. And I cannot say strongly enough that an organization that turns to the community to ask the community what they want, that's an organization who really gets it. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much to LBBC for really listening to the metastatic community and presenting what we really need. So my name is Abigail Johnston, and I was diagnosed in 2017 with de novo metastatic breast cancer. So from the beginning, metastatic, I was never early stage. And I was 38. I was tandem breastfeeding my 2 boys. They were 2 and 4 at the time. They're now 7 and 5. So it was an extremely disruptive time. I am hormone positive, HER2 negative, and I discovered along the way that we carry the ATM mutation in my family, which is very similar to the BRCA mutation. Additionally, I carry the PIK3CA mutation, which means that I am eligible for some of the more recent medication like Piqray, which is one of the drugs that I'm taking. And I think the most important thing for me in sharing my story is that it humanizes a very difficult to understand disease. And to have a face and a person of someone who's living with the disease makes that disease more personal. It makes that disease more understandable. And I think it makes that disease something that people want to support in a very different way.
Thanks so much, Abigail, for sharing that. And I want to turn now to Chawnte.
Thanks again to the LBB staff for definitely hosting an awesome conference. Even though we are not in person, it's still, the Zoom conferences have let us feel connected. My name is Shawn Tei Randall. I'm from Columbia, Maryland, which is a suburb in Maryland in between Baltimore and DC. I was early stage in 2017. And I metastasized to metastatic triple negative breast cancer in April of 2019. After my initial early stage diagnosis, I did a lot of one-on-one peer mentoring and advocacy, just trying to make sure that I spread the word out that at 40, I had breast cancer. I look like I am someone's mother. I am someone's sister. I am someone's cousin and daughter. And it's not just for older women, and definitely not only just older white women. It is striking African-American women at a large number, and our medical disparities, outcome disparities are very high. And so I wanted to make sure when people thought of breast cancer, they didn't just think that they were not included. And I wanted to make sure that I showed my face and shared my story to help others.
Thank you, Chawnte. I really appreciate you sharing that. Ruth, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Ruth Pepper. I live in Abington Township, northwest of Philadelphia. I'm a Philly girl at heart. And I was diagnosed in 2018 with HR positive, HER2 negative. And then a month later with a bone metastases full blown. So my treatment changed after it was all set, so after the battery of tests. And my doctor, that is what is really super important, my doctors both listen to me, and they want to know how I feel and how I feel about this whole journey. And like Abigail, I applaud LBBC, because it was my doctor that suggested that I call LBBC and make the connection. And the day that I spoke to Sharon was a very special day in my life. And now all the other staff, it's just been, you are all awesome. And thanks LBBC for all you do and all your hard work. Hi, ladies and guys.
Thank you, Ruth. And Sheila, could you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Sheila McGlown, and I live in Swansea, Illinois. I'm about 12 miles from St. Louis, Missouri. I'm right on the Missouri-Illinois border. But I'm originally from Cleveland, the military. I was in the United States Air Force for 25 years. And when I was diagnosed, I was active duty. I was sitting at my desk and I sneezed, and I thought, it's kind of weird that it burned. I went to my doctor and I left out the office. You have stage 4 breast cancer that had spread to your liver and ribs. I was diagnosed de novo in 2009. So I hope and pray my story gives women hope that, we're out here. Long-time survivors are out here. And the one thing that I learned was, one day I was talking to my best friend, I was just crying, and she said, Sheila, there are so many people living longer with metastatic breast cancer. So she said, start reading the good stories and leave the bad stories alone. So I hope my story, especially in the African-American community, I've been with LBBC since 2013, and I thank you because my advocacy started with Living Beyond Breast Cancer. And when I was diagnosed, I didn't know any Black women with breast cancer. My mom had died of breast cancer, but she was the only one that I knew. So I'm like, this needs to be changed. So my advocacy and my platform is, as Chawnte said, raising awareness about African Americans and how we're dying at a faster rate, and just to give women hope and love and motivation, and hopefully my story inspires someone. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. And as you mentioned, you were diagnosed in 2009, so quite a while ago. And one of the first things that I wanted to talk about today is that kind of very recent diagnosis and how you cope with that, because we know that at this conference there are always hundreds of people who attend who have just been diagnosed and who are trying to figure out how to cope. So I wanted to start by talking a little bit about that experience from the two individuals on our panel who are most recently diagnosed. And Chawnte, I think I'll start with you. You were diagnosed, I think you said, in 2018. Can you tell us a little bit about how you coped at first, how you absorbed that information?
Sure. I was actually diagnosed with MBC in April 2nd of 2019, which fortunately for me was exactly 4 days before the LBBC Metastatic Breast Cancer Conference in Philadelphia. And I'm about an hour and a half away, and my best friends live there, and we decided to go. And I learned so much there, and it's nothing like being in a room or being surrounded or being aware that there are women surviving with metastatic breast cancer just like you. So I was sad and I was a little upset, but I didn't have a lot of time to dwell on it because here I was witnessing such great things at this conference, and it just revolutionized my thought process and gave me hope and gave me ways to get involved in advocacy and educating myself and my family. Stage 4 cancer is not the same cancer that it was back in the day where it's an immediate death sentence. We are living, we are thriving, and we plan to be here for as long as possible.
Thanks for sharing that, Chawnte. And you're actually the example of a person who comes right into this program and meets hundreds of people. I want to actually turn to Jen now. We haven't even had a chance to introduce you yet, to ask you, what are some of the issues that are most important to talk about or deal with upon a new diagnosis of metastatic breast cancer?
I mean, I think on some level that'll be different for everyone, but oftentimes people with a new diagnosis are having a lot of new language thrown at them. They're trying to learn the healthcare system. They've also been told that they have a life-threatening illness that can be really scary. So I think some of the most important things people can do is really amass their support system. So whether that's family, friends, partners, people who really can be there for them, work on how they're going to communicate with people, and also really build their medical team and use a lot of patience with themselves, because anytime we're experiencing such a significant change like metastatic breast cancer, there's going to take time to learn and get used to things. And so I love hearing that so many people find LBBC so early, because having a network of people who are at different points along the journey can be really helpful, and that can be a big part of the support system. But really making sure you have people in your corner so that when you're having good days, you have people to celebrate with you. And when you're feeling down, you have people to remind you of the things to be hopeful for.
Thanks, Jen. That's really helpful. And one of the things you mentioned that I'm kind of curious about is whether some of you got that kind of support from your healthcare professionals, whether they were able to give you a sense of what you were going to be facing. Abigail, did your providers, were they able to give you a sense of what the landscape was going to look like as a person with metastatic breast cancer?
You know, I think the hard thing about hearing there's no longer a cure for your diagnosis, you stop listening after that, frankly. And my very first medical oncologist, frankly, the first time I met him, I told my husband afterwards, I am never going back to him, because he was so incredibly paternalistic. I was the same age as his daughter. And the way that he talked to me, I'm a lawyer, and I have two master's degrees. A master's degree and a bachelor's degree. I always forget how many degrees I have because I go to school a lot. I learn a lot. And so to be told by somebody who I wasn't necessarily looking at as above me to speak how I felt like he was speaking down to me was not part of what I wanted as a doctor. However, when we were finding out that I was metastatic, he was the best possible person to actually hold my hand. And the one thing I remember from that initial appointment was he told me that he would be with me every step of the way. Then he retired a couple of months later. So, but that initial, I wasn't going to be alone, that's what I needed to hear. But as I have gone through the process of understanding more about my diagnosis, I really have found that everyone's support system is very, very different. Now, as somebody who is more involved in advocacy, my support system is much more the people who are living with the same disease. It's much more the researchers that I meet. It's much more the doctors that I meet, and not just the medical doctors. I have a very large team that includes a naturopath. It includes an acupuncturist who's also a Chinese medicine doctor. I have a chiropractor. I have a neurologist who is also a functional medicine doctor, which is very different from the allopathic model that most medical doctors follow. And so I have found that pulling together people who come at this issue from a variety of different perspectives means that I get the full picture for my whole life, not just are my cancer cells dying, because that's so important, but also people who are really, really, really important, really focused on, is my vitamin C level where it should be? Is my vitamin D level where it should be? I'm having all of this nausea. Is my vitamin B12 level where it should be? And I just find that having people who are looking at things from all perspectives means that I get a much fuller picture. Obviously, as we lose people, and that was really on my mind this morning, all of the people that we've lost since last year, all the people we've lost from my Hear My Voice class, all the people I saw last year and hugged for the last time, that's hard. And I don't have a great way of telling you how to deal with that, but the value that I have gotten from the other women that are living with my same disease is far and away larger and more significant than anything I get from anybody who is not. And so I've come to understand that grief is literally the price of love. And that is a price that I am willing to pay to engage with the people who really get it and really understand what I'm going through.
Thank you for sharing that, Abigail. And I really love that idea that grief is the price of love. We will have a workshop tomorrow that is focusing on grief. And for those of you with us who are interested in that, it's a terrific presentation. I'm wondering whether some of the things that Abigail talked about, sort of the variety of experiences, resonate with some of you. Chawnte, was there something that you wanted to share?
Yes, I did want to share. When I was early stage, my GYN nurse practitioner who found the lump within 4 days of my actual diagnosis, when she called me back with the results, she found me a local in-person support group. And I've been part of that support group for early stage and all the way into the metastatic realm now. I keep going to the early stage group just to give information and share knowledge. And like I said, I've bonded with a lot of those ladies there. And I actually belong to 3 different METS groups in 3 different areas because, you know, there's a different mix of people in each and every one. And Abigail is right. You know, we seem to bond in this community very quickly. And then we bond tightly. And sometimes often the drawback is grief when we lose them, because I've lost 2 friends in the past 45 days. But I also join a lot of social media support groups for those of us that can't be in person or who want to remain anonymous or don't want to spread their story publicly, but you can still get assistance if you are on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. A lot of us are very active in those groups, and we do question and answer. We do venting, we do beauty, we do hair, you know, all kind of different things. So it's a mix of things that keep people like myself moving and positive and sharing information.
Thank you, Chawnte. Sheila, was there something you wanted to add there?
I think initially when I was diagnosed, I didn't know that cancer support groups even existed. I was just like blind to it. I guess I kind of blocked it out my mind when my mom died. But I think once I started advocacy, and I attended a support group down at in St. Louis, and I'm just like, this is a whole completely different world. And it wasn't only, I think I was explaining my story the other day, when I went to my first conference for LBBC, it was a all stage conference. And the women there, they just treated me like stage didn't matter. And I was just like, man, this is so cool that nobody's like running away from me because I have stage 4. So I thought that was really good. And, I just say my doctor, she's amazing from day one. I told her we got this 10-year relationship. Nah, don't leave, because if she leave, I'm going to leave. I told her I'm moving with her. But, it's like Chawnte and Abigail was saying, it's just a great community. And I know I can call anyone and cry and sit in the corner and cry and be like, I'm just having a bad day. And I know they get it. They understand it. They be like, okay, I'm gonna hold space for you today. Go ahead, do what you got to do. Get it out. Okay. And get up in the morning and start over, So yeah, it's a tight knit community, and I love my NBC sisters.
Thanks for sharing that, Sheila. And I think you're speaking to one of our attendees is asking the question of the panel, what do you do when you feel that nobody understands you? So a lot of you have spoken about how you connect with other people with metastatic breast cancer and you get that feeling of sisterhood and understanding, or brotherhood and understanding. What do you do if you're feeling really isolated and that the people around you just really don't understand what it is you're going through? Who would like to address that? Ruth?
That's what happened to me, and that's why it took me. I had a very negative experience, which really took me by surprise, because I love being around people, and I was surprised at the negativity. And I finally handled it. Just no more. Everybody was telling me every single cancer story from 30 years ago, and I'm newly diagnosed. And like Abigail said, you have it in your bones, all right? And it's like, okay, what does all that mean? It's so much to process in the beginning. So I turned to just be keeping busy. And an email was sent out that just like chill everybody. And a few of those people are no longer in my life, and that's okay. That's where they are, and it's where I am. And I would like to say how important meditation, that has been one of the things that got me through the battery of tests that was happening. And one of the things I remember saying to Dr. Maid and Dr. Kreitzer when I saw them after the battery of tests, I told them that I felt like I donated my body to science and I was still in it, all right, because it was unbelievable. And Dr. Kreitzer said, well, we'll give it back to you. And so meditation and exercising and taking care. And these ladies were the first ladies on the panel that I actually spoke to in these 2 years about it. So I have tears in my eyes with joy that it is, because I kind of cloistered, went on with my life, taking good care, all right? But I have missed that camaraderie, and it's just fantastic to have it.
Thanks for sharing that, Ruth. Chawnte, did you have something to add?
Yes, I think it's also important to know that seeking a mental health professional there's nothing wrong with it. I literally go to therapy weekly or bi-weekly, sometimes just to talk. I'm fortunate enough that my therapist is actually a woman of color, and she's a breast cancer survivor, so she gets exactly what I'm saying. But sometimes it's good to be able to talk to someone who is outside of the situation so they can help you kind of get a little perspective. But I do have to admit, there is nothing like making the interpersonal connections with other breast cancer patients or MBC patients, because when I'm not feeling well, like I text Sheila like late at night one night, I was having a weird side effect and feeling crazy. And I said, has this ever happened to you? She said, oh yeah, that happened to me. That's a drug interaction with the doctor. And that was the answer. So for those of you that are feeling isolated, definitely we're all on social media. Look up our names, request us. We can give email or telephone numbers or whatever way you want to contact. We don't want you to feel alone. We definitely want you to feel free to reach out.
That's a great point, Chawnte. And I think probably in the chat, we can even list a couple of resources for places where you can connect. Jen, I want to ask you, since we're talking about mental health professionals, if you could talk a little bit about if someone is looking to reach out and they're not sure how to do that or how to get that conversation started, what would you recommend?
I love listening to you all speak. This is so great to hear all the shout outs for mental health and support groups and building that support system. I think the first place I always recommend people start is if there's a social worker at the cancer center they're at. Oftentimes the social workers at at your cancer center know the local resources really well. And so that's a great place to start. I know some places don't have social workers. And so using some of the larger organizations like Cancer Support Community, Cancer Care, LBBC is a great organization that can help connect you with resources that are in your area. I almost feel like now that we've moved to a more virtual format, that it's going to be easier to find therapists who are specialized in cancer, because you're not going to be as limited by someone that you can get to. But reaching out to the social worker at your cancer center or any of the national organizations is a really great place as a first start. And then, of course, anyone that you're meeting in your support groups, seeing what has worked for them may be a good place to see if that would work for you as well.
Thanks, Jennifer. And someone had a great point in the chat about sometimes you have to go to a couple of different therapists to find someone who's a good fit for you. So, and it's very hard when you're in that vulnerable space to keep trying, but if you're really not feeling comfortable, don't give up. Chawnte, I think you had something you wanted to add there.
I wanted to add one more thing. It's not only are we going through it, but our families are going through it. So caregiver support groups and caregivers receiving mental health services is also very important. I have a 22-year-old daughter. My parents, especially my mother, is struggling emotionally, and a lot of my friends, it was a hard blow for them with the MBC diagnosis. So they have support groups online and locally for caregivers, and it's the same type of close-knit community, because sometimes in our stages where we're dealing with stuff, we can kind of be not the best people to deal with, or it is a whole lot for them to hold on to. So it's good for them to also express themselves and feel supported.
I think that's such an important point, Chawnte, because everyone goes through the diagnosis differently. And by allowing caregivers to get the support they need, it allows them to support you better. And so making sure that everyone can handle the diagnosis in their own way, but also learn how to come together to communicate in a way that can be really helpful is important. And sometimes that's hard to do together. And so having each member of your support team or your partner get the help that they need can make you all stronger in working through the.
We lost you for a second there. Gotta love technology, right?
Oh, sorry. I don't know where you lost me, but I'm just putting a plug in for caregivers to really make sure they're taking care of themselves, because that gives them the opportunity to take care of those with the diagnosis.
And that is so true. I want to just jump in here. Sorry, but my husband is not somebody who would typically seek out mental health support. And so I told him that the only thing that I would require of him is to find a therapist and continue to go for as long as I am in treatment, for really as long as I'm alive. And that was something that he wasn't so excited about at the beginning, but has seen the benefit of that over these past 3 years. So I don't think that it's a bad thing to require that of the people around you, because they are sometimes, I think men especially, I hate to be sexist here, but I think men don't ask for help the same way that women do. And I don't think that our relationship would be as healthy as it is now, and he would be able to support me as much as he has been if he didn't have somebody 100% just in his corner. So just a little plug for, sometimes we got to push the people who are helping us to get the help that they need in the midst of them trying to help us.
Ruth, I think you have something to add.
Thank you. And it's to add just that what turned out with me, what happened to me is my book club, who all the ladies are in their 50s. And I saw my 50s a while ago. And they just knew about the experience and just embraced me all these 2 years, which is wonderful. So I applaud them for that. And thank you, everybody, for all your.
Thanks, Ruth. And I think, we're sort of circling around talking about different kinds of relationships. So why don't we just talk about that for a couple of minutes? We've talked a little bit about partners, and I'm wondering if someone would like to share what your biggest concerns are for the people around you. When you were diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, what are your biggest worries for the people around you?
I think for me, I was single when I was diagnosed, And I was like, what man gonna want me with NBC? You know, ain't no man gonna, cause you know, they gonna think I'm gonna die in a couple of years. But I did find my husband. And, you know, there is love. You know, I just want to encourage women and men. There is love with the diagnosis like NBC. So I'm grateful for that. And I think my only concern was telling my father because his wife died of breast cancer. And, you know, he was like, it's my fault. And I was like, no, it's nobody's fault. It's something that happened. And I told my daughter, and she's talking about, well, I'm going to have a nervous breakdown. I said, well, I'm not having a nervous breakdown. You're not going to have a nervous breakdown. What you're going to do is get your bachelor's, and we want to continue to fight this disease. So I think that, you know, I don't expect my husband and daughter and the people around me that haven't had cancer to understand because they're not going to understand. But as I tell my husband, I want you to validate my feelings. That's all I want you to do is validate it. Don't downplay them. You know, this is, you know, just validate how I feel today because some days I just don't feel like cancer, you know. So, you know, and he understands it. It's taken him a while because he came into the relationship. I had one boob and it's like he had to learn a lot, but as I said, just validate my feelings when I don't feel like being bothered or, you know, whatever. It is what it is. So, you know, we continue to fight and we continue to, you know, be around our family members. My family means the world to me. And I truly believe I'm still here because of them.
Thank you, Sheila. Chawnte?
My greatest concern is my daughter. She's the only one I got. She's 22. She was in college in her second semester studying biomedical science. And so I was thinking, I've asked the first thing I said, oh my God, what am I going to tell my daughter? What do I say? And we have a very, very close bond. She is now like my best friend now. And she's an amazing person. But I got to thinking of all these things. You know, you try to get your ducks in a row and make your plans, your final plans and stuff in order. So I'm like, now I have to really kind of have these conversations and make these decisions. And without trying to disrupt her and make her, you know, panic, ruin her schooling, have her, you know, have to take a semester off from school, but try to figure out how to balance the normal with also making these decisions and having these discussions. The same thing with my parents. You know, it bothers my mom so much for me to discuss a living will or my final arrangements. Because of course they don't want to hear that. They don't want to think about that, but I need to let them know this is what I want done. This is where it is. And then we just have to, you know, take in the information. I'm not saying that I'm not giving up. I'm not saying that I'm not hopeful. I'm just making sure that this is taken care of so that the legacy can move forward. And I also try to educate my friends and family by the organizations that I advocate for and that I support so publicly, so that even when I'm not here, that my legacy will continue on and my advocacy can become their advocacy and it can make changes. If not for me, then it can be for someone else.
Thank you for sharing that, Chawnte. There's a couple of things in there I'd like to talk about a little bit more. One, I just want to follow up with a question from an attendee who says she has a 21-year-old daughter who hates asking for help. What suggestions do you have to encourage her to get emotional support or other support, online support that you, and I think Sheila, your daughter's a little older than that, but what kind of resources have you found that would be useful to this woman?
So for myself, I know that there were therapists available for college students. And also I made sure she knew how to use our insurance and find a mental health professional. We've been in therapy before, so mental health is not a subject that's unfamiliar in my household. And then I also told her to speak to a couple friends that she trusted. Because to me, maybe I've seen her cry 3 times maybe in the past 3 years. Otherwise, she has a soldier face to me and she talks to me and you know, we spend a lot of time, but we don't necessarily talk about how she feels about it, which I can respect, but I also let her know that I'm available. But suggesting that she reach out to friends that she's comfortable and that she trusts, even other family members. I'm divorced, but even her father There are a list of different things that you can try to broach it. And I had gotten a book actually at the last LBBC conference from a young lady whose parent was diagnosed when she was 17, I do believe, and she wrote a book, but I can't remember who it was, but I'll go look in the bag and see if Janine can post it for later. And I bought that for my daughter as well. So it's just a very different things. You have to try to give them a whole lot of different options, and then see, encourage them to seek something.
Absolutely. And we're also getting a couple of questions about younger children. So I wanted to give both Abigail, who has young children, and Ruth, who has grandchildren and great-grandchildren, an opportunity to answer this question. Just wondering how the panelists have dealt with telling their young children about their diagnosis and the things related to it.
So my boys, I have 2 little boys. They were just 2 and just 4 when I was diagnosed. They're 7 and 5 now. So our parenting style has been very open and frank at the appropriate developmental level. Like we always called every body part what it's called. We never named anything different names. There were no pet names. We never baby talk to our kids. We always spoke to them as if they were adults, on appropriate developmental level, of course. And so we've continued that. And most of what they know as mommy is sick, mommy has things that are wrong with her. I think that the biggest thing for my now 7-year-old was because I have bone mets, and pretty much immediately had to have titanium rods inserted in both femurs. I couldn't walk. I couldn't walk upstairs. I couldn't walk to the mailbox. And I was always extremely active with him. And so he was always very concerned about mommy getting her run fixed. And when will your run be fixed, mommy? So that, and it was an instructive time for us to talk about what doctors do and how sometimes when doctors help you, that sometimes it hurts more for a little while, but then it's overall better. We have avoided so far using the word terminal. We try to avoid using the word cancer, quite frankly, because my concern always has been that he would be on the playground and another child would talk about their grandfather or their grandmother dying of cancer. And so we're trying not to connect cancer with death so far, because they're not really ready for that. But the other thing that I did was I scoured the internet for every book I could find that was written by moms who had breast cancer and was having to explain it to their child. And there are amazing books out there that I found, quite a few from the UK, which is very interesting because they have a little bit different language. But LBBC does have a program called Reading for Reassurance, and they have developmentally appropriate books for the different developmental ages. And I was very happy that when I got my package that I'd already gotten all of the books. But it just showed me that LBBC has great resources. So I think that younger children, it's really helpful for them to see something instead of just hearing it. I think for boys especially, that because they are a little bit more visual. I also have found several books more for the idea of chronic illnesses. Now, I don't believe that metastatic breast cancer is chronic, and that's a whole other conversation. But the idea that there's not a beginning, middle, and end. And I think that children, because especially young children, they have a different sense of time. And so it's been really important for us to give them the reassurance that they need in the moment, but then not leave those lingering questions or them not think that something is going to happen right now. That has been an issue. I have to say, though, for me, my biggest issue was this fictional other person who was going to take my place. And I was pissed off that some other woman was going to get to marry my husband and be mother to my kids. And I was terrible to my husband. I went and redid all of my estate planning to protect all of the money from my life insurance so this fictional other person couldn't get at my money. I was a crazy person. Actually, he says I'm mostly a crazy person, but that was something that was so big for me at the beginning that I was going to be replaced. And I think a lot of it is because my kids were so young, and you think back, when are your first memories? It's probably not before 5 or 6. So at that time, I legitimately was terrified that my children were going to just forget me. And it's gotten easier and better over time in terms of focusing on building memories with my kids so that they'll have those things. I have boxes for them. I'm writing letters for them, like to open on their wedding day, to open when they graduate from college, those kinds of things to, I hope I'll see all of those things. But if I can't, I'm trying really hard to leave things at those milestones for my kids to have my perspective, my words. We're doing a lot of videos, also thinking about those things. So I think for those of us with young kids, it's not just how do I tell my children, but it's also, as a mom of young kids, how do I cope with the fact that somebody else is going to be potentially their primary caregiver? So don't be a crazy person like me and be mad at your husband, because at the end of the day, I did finally remember he picked me. So he'll pick somebody good again. And I do want him to find love again once I'm gone, even though, I don't know, probably haunt her, pull her hair or something.
Well, Abigail, I don't want to just ignore what you said, which you talked a little bit about anger and about being angry. So we've talked about grief, we've talked about sadness, we've talked about relationships, but one thing we haven't talked about is anger, and being angry about the fact that metastatic breast cancer has come into your life. And that you did not ask for it. So I'm wondering if we have a couple of people who are asking about your anger. Did you have anger? How did you deal with that anger? Would someone like to speak to that?
So I actually just discovered, and it's Tori Guide's fault, but she was telling me about this Enneagram thing, which is a combination of the Myers-Briggs personality profile and the Strength Finders questionnaire that a lot of businesses use. And newsflash, I am type 8, which is like a super angry one. And I do get angry. And as a white person and having white privilege, I can go into a doctor's office and dress them down. I'm a lawyer, and I am super good at cross-examining people and making them cry. It was like a point of pride to me when I was a litigator that I would regularly make experts cry. And that's also why people hate lawyers, I know. But anger is an accessible emotion for me. But I had a little bit of an epiphany recently from my father, who's a licensed mental health counselor, because he saw how much my anger, I mean, it would drain me, and it does. I get exhausted because it uses up so much of the small resources that I have when I am so angry. But underneath all of that anger is that I feel powerless. I feel helpless. I feel powerless at the hands of a healthcare system where the majority of the people that we talk to are minimum wage employees who aren't doing a good job. And that is a huge issue for me. I've run businesses. I had my own law firm before I was diagnosed. And I tell supervisors all the time, I would have fired that girl so fast. And that's not very nice. And I know that. And I can usually calm down later. But I feel so powerless. I feel so helpless. And I cover it up by being angry. I cover it up by getting what I want when I'm mad. And I'm really good at getting what I want when I'm mad. So it's productive, but it's not really helpful for me. And so I'm working really, really hard and trying to write and blog about how do we sit there in the powerlessness? How do we feel that emotion so it doesn't build up so much that then we explode? I don't know what
Thank
the
you
answer
for that
is.
honesty, Abigail. That's really, really helpful.
Sure.
And I saw a lot of nodding heads. And I'll start with Shawn Tei.
I didn't necessarily get angry. I had a moment where like, this sucks. I still have those moments every now and again, like cancer sucks. And especially when I lost my 2 friends the past 2 months. But I talked to the therapist, and I really realized that I turn whatever negative emotions that I have to fuel me into making change, fuel me into the advocacy work, fuel me into doing more of the things that I want to do, spending great times with friends, making those, even though COVID has kind of messed that all up, I try to spend a lot more time with the people who are valuable to me in my life, and do the things that I've been wanting to do that I've held off, that, you know, I didn't get a chance to do. So it's a lot of different things, and a lot of different feelings that come. That's why I say therapy does help you work through some of them, but I just try to channel anything negative, because stress and negative emotions are shown to spread cancer. So I try to just translate it, make it move me forward, give me energy and determination.
Thank you, Chawnte. And Jen, I'm wondering if you could just speak for a minute to what Chawnte was saying about stress and anxiety feeding cancer. This is something that we hear about a lot in the metastatic community, a lot of anxiety around it. Can you speak a little bit to what the goals of our working through feelings of anger and vulnerability?
I mean, I think all emotions are good, right? But when we get stuck in having one emotion over and over and over again, whether it's anger or feeling really sad all of the time, we want to make sure there's a balance to all of those things. I think staying away from self-blame is really important. So I hate to hear people say, like, being angry caused my cancer, or being stressed out caused my cancer, but also you want to make sure that you're living the best life you can, spending time with family and friends and having a lot of joy, and anger can get in the way of that. And so when anger gets in the way of that, that's when it's important to do something about it. But anger tells you a lot. It gives you really good information, and oftentimes can be a cover up for feeling powerless or feeling sad or trying to avoid grief. And so focusing on where that's coming from, looking for things that make you feel better, like spending time with friends and family, working to resolve that with a therapist. All of those are really important things, but it's also okay to be angry and okay to have days where you're not okay. You just don't want to have every day feel that way.
Understood. Ruth, I've seen you nod a couple of times, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond.
Well, I wanted to just say my grandchildren, 3 of them I'm close to, and my husband passed on from cancer 17 years ago. And Abigail, I applaud you deciding not to do the C word, the cancer, that is. So they were angry when Dan passed, and now they're in their 20s, all right? My granddaughter is a nurse down in Florida, pediatric nurse, and she talked the other day. But being aware of them, especially the 3 of them, college. So as when we got together as a family, I said, now we're not going to talk about it all the time. I'm on Ibrance. We're going to cheer Ibrance. So that's what we do when we get together, to make it positive, because they have memories, and it's not possible to remove those memories. And I know that they're thinking right away what's going to happen to me. So when we were together before COVID started, we got in a circle at the end and we say, you know, and then we jump up and give one another the high five, go Ibrance. But that gives them a sense of they're cheering, because they're in college, and, you know, what we won't get into college and what happened and being closed and them coming home. They have their own issues, is my point. So whenever they text me, hi, how are you? I'm fine, and everything. And Abigail, I'm just impressed with so many of your many decisions and the advocacy that, you know, Sheila and Shawn Tei. And Jen, your words were really something about anger. I'm big on the stress, anything to do stress. I can't express that more. Like, I am passionate about removing stress in anything, any tool you have. I'm able to take myself meditation, make myself actually numb from it. And one of the meditations I do is to welcome my new cells, which I'm big on that, because I think there's cellular grief. I know there's cellular grief, because I didn't think I was ever going to be sane again after my husband passed. And I could feel that in all my cells. So now that I'm in my position, I definitely meditate every day and welcome all those new cells and tell those other cells to shoo away.
Thank you for sharing that, Ruth. And that's sort of a good segue. We only have 10 more minutes together, unfortunately. And I would really like to spend this time talking a little bit about the kind of methods that all of you employ to manage the kind of natural uncertainty that you live with when you have metastatic breast cancer. And it feels right now even more intense because everyone in the world is feeling the kind of uncertainty that you live with every day because of all the changes in our world. And when the pandemic first hit, I remember seeing a lot of my metastatic friends on social media putting up memes about how, yeah, this is what my life is like all the time. Now you know what it feels like to feel uncertain and to wake up every morning and not know exactly what you're facing for the day. So I'd like to just ask each of you to tell us one or two things that you do to help manage your uncertainty. And I'll start with you, Sheila.
I guess after living with 10 years with NBC, I don't worry about uncertainty because I can't change it. You know, even if I'm worried about it, what is it going to change? You know, my mom said, don't worry about things you can't change. So, and if you can change it, change it. So, and through my faith, I just don't, it's taken away from my life. If I sat there and worried about, you know, what's going to happen tomorrow or, you know, what this scan is going to say or whatever, I'm taking my joy away from my family and my little dog I just got, my little puppy. So I just don't, I guess I just don't worry about that anymore. Not so much worry about it, but I just, you know, my motto is wake up and live. So every day I want to change the world. I want to make the world a better place. I want to hug not only a breast cancer survivor or thriver, but just be, you know, my mom always said, if you help one person, you've done what God has chosen you to do on this earth. And, you know, I'm about to get emotional. But, you know, when breast cancer took my mom, I was angry. But I just have to channel that energy to something else. And I channel it to helping individuals get through their diagnosis. And I hope, like I said, my story gives people hope and inspire women to help out in their community and, you know, just don't stop living. Enjoy every moment, enjoy every chocolate chip, enjoy every flower, just enjoy, you know.
Chawnte, will you tell us a couple of things that you call on?
Definitely living life till its fullest every day. Like Sheila said, I wake up and it doesn't matter how much pain I'm in, I'm alive, I'm awake, and I can deal with it. Some of the things that I like to do that help me with stress relief is work out. So I can manage what my body can and cannot do. It may not always be lifting weights that I'm used to. It could just be stretching, it could be chair yoga, it could be anything. But those good endorphins that get stimulated when you do physical activity is one of the things that make me happier. And it's proven to give more positive emotions. And those interpersonal connections, like Sheila, your story, when I first met you in person at SABCS, I hugged you and I said, you give me so much hope. So it's making these connections and the people that you see, and from everyday life, I just watch you guys live and smile, and that makes me more determined to do the same.
Thank you, Chawnte. Abigail?
So I have a little bit of a hard time with the whole, like, every day is wonderful. It feels like I have a lot of pressure on me that, like, everything's supposed to be amazing. Like, when I feel bad, when I'm in a lot of pain, when I'm nauseous, like, every day is not good. So where I turn is knowledge, is learning. And it helps me to get back a little bit of that control. Yes, I'm a control freak. But it helps me to go to the conferences. It helps me to be researching new drugs. It helps me to make connections with researchers so that I better understand my body. I better understand the disease. I have in my mind the 4 or 5 or 6 next lines of treatment that might be appropriate. And I'm always talking to my doctor about that. I probably send my doctor at least one study a week frankly, because I'm always researching and looking at different things. Now, most of the time she's like, no, but sometimes we have a good conversation about that. So because I struggle with powerlessness, because I struggle with the uncertainty of things, and I hate being uncertain about things. I don't know if it's a personality thing. I am not good at living with not having an answer, because you gotta have an answer, some answer. Maybe it's the wrong answer. That's okay, as long as there's something. So that's how I deal with it, kind of from a big picture perspective. But I think the other thing that pulls me back to what Sheila was talking about is my kids, because they don't care about anything but whether or not they can eat a snack right now, or they can get on their iPad right now, or whatever they don't want to do, like not go to bed. So that helps me come back to reality, come back to the here and now. I think that, and the final thing is to be around people who are very different than me. I'm not the huggy person. Frankly, I grew up in the Midwest, and people who come up and try to hug me that I don't know, like I'm like, what are you doing? You're in my space, you're in my bubble. So that's not me, and that's okay. And I think the great thing about a panel like this, and a great thing about going to these conferences, is you realize we're all individuals, and we're all doing this cancer thing in whatever way that we're figuring out along the way, and there's no wrong answers. That was more than 2 or 3 things. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Ruth?
That was wonderful, all of you. Where I come from is we are all unique. There's none of our journeys are exactly the same. With me, I decided early on, as I mentioned the meditation, I thank the Lord for every day, and I find joy every day, and that's what I decide. And there are some days I call the word funky. I don't know if that's a real word, but when I feel funky, or teary-eyed, as I say, I call somebody who maybe is right now a senior that's in a retirement community, or somebody I know who's having a problem. That is like my fix-it, to call somebody else who's having a hard time, no matter what the reason. And I wish everybody who was part of the conference today just the best journey possible for them. And being unique, don't worry about being different. We all just have a different journey, and stick with who you are and find something that you like to do. My nature photography, I get lost in my pictures. I turn my computer and I can get lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And it's so amazing to hear each of you has really individualized, unique ways of finding joy, finding resilience, tapping into it when dealing with metastatic breast cancer. So I'm going to ask Jen one last question, and then ask all of you so we can close up. Jen, is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with in terms of tapping into their own reserves when they are living with metastatic breast cancer?
I think what was just coming up for me as people were talking is this idea of giving yourself permission to have a good day, giving yourself permission to have a bad day, giving yourself permission to be where you are. I think oftentimes we're trying to talk ourselves into being this or being that, and it can take a lot of energy. And so really, I think tapping into your reserves is being kind to yourself and giving yourself permission to be where you're at, and reaching out for help when that's no longer working for you.
Thanks, Jen. And I'm going to quickly go around and ask each of you to give me one word that you want to leave our attendees with today in terms of what you hope they'll take from this presentation. And I'm going to start with Ruth.
Tolerance.
Thank you. Abigail?
Individuality.
Chawnte?
Support.
And Sheila?
Patience.
All wonderful words. And the word I will leave you with is embrace. Because unlike Abigail, I feel like if I could be with you, I would be putting my arms around all of you, and really, really wish that we were physically together. But I am also really glad that we're probably serving hundreds of people who could not be with us on site. And so glad that we could bring you into our community and be able to share this afternoon with you. So with that, I want to thank all of you for sharing your stories, for being open and sharing your vulnerability. I hope all of you have a really peaceful evening.